celebrating 48 years on the air. Award-winning Farmweek is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, we continue with On the Farm, a young, large animal vet facing an uphill battle. Plus, speaking of uphill, a preview of next week, a father and son dairy-turned-beef cattle operation. In Southern gardening, did you know landscapes have fan clubs too? Well, kind of. And back on our feature, Kim Klunk pushing through challenges and looking for answers. Farm Week starts right now.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach Ashmore.
And I'm Mike Russell. Great to have you with us again here on Farm Week, brought to you by Mississippi State University Extension. This week we continue Season 2 of On the Farm, our Emmy-winning series on stress in agriculture. In Episode 3 we meet veterinarian Kim Klunk, an MSU grad. Her love of animals and loyalty to family propelled her into this kind of work. But in a story that unfortunately isn't unusual for veterinarians, the pressure began to mount.
I grew up on a farm with cows, horses, goats. My family milked the goats growing up. I grew up showing cattle. With my mom being a vet, it's something I've always been around from the time I was really little. I went with her on emergency calls to the clinic late at night. Saw a lot of different things that most kids don't see growing up. My first year of vet school, my little brother passed away in a car accident. A lot of the reason I wanted to do large animal work kind of goes back to my family, and my little brother, he was really involved in large animal stuff. That kind of played a big part of it. I feel like it kind of solidified that I knew I wanted to come back and give back to the community that raised me, and also be there for my parents. Kind of starting out the day, usually get here a little before 8. See what the appointment schedule looks like for the day, kind of the layout of what's going on. Every day is different. You never know what you're going to get into or what's going to come up.
Small animal clinics can see as many as 40 patients a day, and that makes for a long day for them. Large animal vets are actually driving out to farms, checking on the health of a herd, doing immunizations of that herd, or following up on a wide variety of animals on a farm.
How old do you have on their papers? Being kind of a new large animal vet in the area, and being a new vet in general, there is anxiety that comes with it. A lot of it is having to gain experience to know, what to do, what things look like, and how to treat them accordingly. I'll just make this up.
The last health paper.
They're doing a wide variety of services all in one day, and they don't always have access to the fancy equipment that they might have access to in a small animal clinic.
Especially being a large animal vet in a rural area, we can't have all the bells and whistles and all the really cool equipment they have out there, just from a financial standpoint. You have to improvise with, different ways of being able to evaluate what's going on. We have to pay the bills to keep the lights on, to pay support staff, to pay ourselves, and also the cost of the medications that go into it. Our little spots look like they've healed up really nice. There's definitely a ripple effect in that, if we aren't able to stay open and provide, it affects the farmers and the people we're trying to work for too. A lot of times cattle operations, there are sicknesses and diseases and stuff that can be preventable, and that's where, a veterinarian's role comes into it, to where they don't lose all of that cost that goes into it, the hard work and time and effort they put into it. And especially in a small rural area where finances are tight.
If something were to influence the health of the herd, now not only are we talking about the health of the animals, but we're talking about the financial health of those families.
You can't spend endless amounts of money treating them and doing what you can for them. So having to kind of work within those means can be difficult, outweighing their value versus the work and money you put into them.
The less hair there is.
So time, money, and resources being what they are, answers don't come easy, and the pressure multiplies. We'll have the conclusion of Kim's story coming up later in the show.
In other news, Congress returned for work in the committee rooms, this time to focus on the EPA in 2 hearings. One of them centered on agriculture and a subject of great interest to farmers. Peter Tubbs has the recap on part of that testimony.
The House Agriculture Committee held a hearing to study the effects that policies of the Environmental Protection Agency are having on American agriculture. Several witnesses testified that while the EPA can be quick to limit some chemical uses in agriculture, they can also be slow to approve or update the use of other chemicals.
Reading through your testimony, I felt the same issues in my district relating to the recent dicamba decision that left many producers scrambling after the purchases for the year had been made. Can you provide insight on how this last-minute nature, this decision, affected your producers?
Yeah, we were really stressed out in the state of Missouri, as were other producers in other states, because we didn't have the certainty. We had the product sitting in the shed, but we weren't sure if we were going to be able to use it. We were very satisfied that EPA made a quick decision with the existing stocks order, and they helped us for the 2024 growing season. But we still have uncertainty for 2025.
So you don't know what to expect going forward. They could change their mind again, right?
Right, and the biggest challenge is the seed supply. Right now, this year, the seed for 2025 is being grown. And so if that dicamba product is not going to be available, we're going to have seed technology out there, but we're not going to be able to have the crop protection technology to help with that.
Next week in part 4 of On the Farm, we'll conclude the series with a look at a father-son team who, like many, decided to shut down their family dairy operation. But even though it was a tough choice, they had a plan B. I interviewed MSU expert Brandy Karish about the pressure of making that plan work.
That is a lot of pressure, and I think farmers, agriculturists in general, there's a lot of pressure to carry on that family legacy, right? You don't want to be that generation, and you hear Will kind of speak to that, about that pressure of that generation and carrying on that family legacy, and that's something that certainly hits home. You're proud of your family's heritage and what the generations before you have done, and you kind of want to work towards carrying on that farm. And there's something that I heard Will say previously that really hit home for me was you have to think about not just carrying on the family dairy farm, but carrying on the family farm, and maybe switching gears a little bit. And that's really, I admire what they've chosen to do to kind of be able to carry on that farm for future generations, and it's things like diversifying, going from just selling milk off those dairy cows to selling calves from those beef cows. Maybe they'll move on one day where they're selling beef off the farm from their calves. There's a lot of different things, and I think a lot of different considerations, and we're seeing that a lot in this next kind of up-and-coming generation of agriculturalists, where they're looking for different ways to branch out because they want to come back to the farm and they want to continue that legacy that was carried on by those future generations or past generations. I think this is a segment that really is going to hit home for a lot of people, Mike, and I think, you know, the Gilmer story is one that we see not just on their farm, but that's carried on a lot of farms, particularly small farms across the Southeast. Farmers are a proud bunch. We're proud of our legacy, we're proud of our land, we're proud of the animals, we're proud of the hard work that we put into things, and I think that really shines through whenever you listen to the Gilmer story and kind of hear and see what they're doing to carry it on for future generations.
That's Season 2, Part 4 of On the Farm with David and Will Gilmer. Their all too familiar story coming up on next week's show.
On the lighter side, did you know that landscapes can have a fan club too? Well, kind of anyway. Turns out that a certain flower with an alter ego is a gardener favorite. Here's Eddie Smith with the explanation.
Today I'm back at the home of Dave and Ginger, admiring their scaevola growing in their landscape. Let's take a closer look at these beautiful plants. Scaevola, often referred to as fanflower, is a captivating plant celebrated for its unique and charming floral structure. Each bloom showcases 5 delicate petals that splay out in a semicircle resembling a fan, and they come in a delightful palette of colors including blue, purple, white, and pink. The petals are often veined with darker hues, adding depth and texture to their already striking appearance. At the center of each flower lies a small, bright-colored throat, creating a beautiful contrast that draws the eye. These flowers grace the plant throughout the warmer months, creating a continuous display of vibrant color. With a spreading, trailing growth habit, Scaevola is ideal as ground cover, where it forms a dense, flowering mat. The plant thrives in full sun, flourishes in well-drained soil, and demonstrates remarkable drought tolerance once established. Its ability to resist pests and diseases further enhances its appeal as a low-maintenance, high-impact addition to any garden. Scaevola's enduring beauty and ease of care make it a favorite among gardeners. I'm Eddie Smith, and I will see you next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a break right here, but don't go away. Coming up, we conclude our Ag Stress series on the farm with the story of large animal vet Kim Klunk. She expected a certain amount of stress when she started practicing a couple of years ago, but long hours, deadlines, and money pressure take a big toll on your mental health. How do you cope, especially when rural areas don't have enough mental health resources? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. On the Farm continues, coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
Here's this week's Farm Week calendar. Just one item this week, the EPA has mandated new training requirements for private pesticide applicators. The requirements, for those who handle restricted use pesticides on farmland and need to renew or obtain certification, began July 1st. The training is on video, covering many new procedures. At the end, there's a 55-question exam, and you must score at least 70%. Cost of the training is $60 per person, with 2 ways to take the test: online or in person at a local extension office. For computer questions about the training and exam, call the Center for Technology Outreach at 662-325-3226. Or for questions more related to who's qualified, who needs to take the training, call 662-325-5829. Remember, the new private pesticide applicator training requirements began July 1st. And that's this week's Farm Week calendar.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations, and their faith. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance toward the views of others. I believe that education is a lifelong process, and the greatest university is the home. That my success as a teacher is proportional to those qualities of mind and spirit that give me welcome entrance to the homes of the families I serve. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
Time for the markets. A new WASDE report dropped while the numbers fell.
That's right. You know, it looks like the WASDE didn't really make much of an impact. We'll get into that. But first, the numbers. What were last week's biggest gains and losses? And then this month's WASDE report. What did it have to tell us? And finally, we speak with MSU row crop economist Will Maples to get his thoughts on the WASDE's impact. So, markets closed last week on the downswing, an interesting turnaround from last week. Let's take a look. Last week's biggest gain, lumber up 39.5 bucks, a near 9% increase from the previous week. Last week's biggest loss, wheat down almost 40 cents. That's nearly a 7% decrease from the previous week. This month's WASDE report dropped last week, a monthly domestic and global supply and production report released by the USDA. Like last month, this particular WASDE didn't appear to affect market prices. Biggest takeaways are mostly to do with higher production both in the U.S. and abroad. Bella Bingham has the numbers.
U.S. wheat supplies raised due to increased production and stocks. Production up due to higher acres and yields. Imports down while feed and residual use up. Season average farm price $5.70 per bushel. Global wheat supplies increased due to higher stocks and production, mainly in the U.S., Canada, and Pakistan. Consumption also up on higher feed, seed, and industrial use. U.S. corn stocks down due to greater use. Exports raised due to increased sales and shipment. Feed and residual use up 75 million bushels. Season average farm price $4.30 per bushel. Global corn production down due to declines in the EU, Canada, and Russia. Exports raised for the U.S. while global stocks up 0.9 million tons. U.S. rice supplies up due to increased production and imports. Production up due to more harvested area and yield. Imports up 1 million hundredweight. Season average farm price unchanged from last month. Global rice supplies increased nearly 1 million tons due to record production in Pakistan. Consumption of residual use also at a new record, about 527 million tons. U.S. soybean production projected down due to less acreage. Yield unchanged at 52 bushels per acre. Ending stocks projected down due to less production and use. Season average farm price $11.10 per bushel. Global soybean beginning stocks up, imports and exports also up. With lower production and minimal changes to use, stocks slightly lower compared to last month. U.S. pork and beef production raised while turkey and broilers decreased. Egg production unchanged. Cattle prices continuing to rise. U.S. milk production forecast lower than last month due to slower growth in milk per cow. For 2024, cheese, butter, non-fat dry milk, and whey prices raised due to tighter milk supplies. U.S. cotton projected domestic use and exports are unchanged. Planted area 1 million acres higher. Ending stocks also higher. Season average farm price 68 cents per pound. Global cotton beginning stocks down while consumption up slightly. As a result, world ending stocks down 860,000 bales.
So now we have some context. Why did the markets respond the way they did? I spoke with Extension row crop economist Will Maples to get his thoughts on the matter, and he says, although it looks like corn was the biggest winner, seems markets didn't care. So, Will, we recently talked about the crop progress report, and now this month's WASDE report has dropped. Did it tell us anything new?
Yeah, so out of this month's WASDE report, really the biggest takeaway was this was a pretty friendly report to corn. They updated corn demand for this incoming marketing year by nearly 100 million bushels. This was really helpful. As we know, we talked about the acreage report last time I was on, and we saw an increase in corn acres. So that helped offset some of that further supply of corn we saw come on to this report. It helped counteract some of that higher supply, better demand. We also saw ending stocks come down a little bit for corn. Unfortunately, though, the market didn't really care. We didn't really see a good bounce in the market based off this kind of favorable news. You know, we haven't even got into the marketing year yet that these demand estimates are for, so we got a long way to go still to see if these demand come true.
Well, any predictions on what any commodities are going to be heading post this report?
So right now, this time of year, we're kind of at the tail end of the weather really being a driver in these markets. In kind of mid-July, we don't worry as much about corn and weather anymore. August, we could still see some weather come into play for soybeans. Soybeans are really made in August. But the biggest thing to kind of keep an eye on going forward is where does USDA end up putting corn and soybean yields? It was a wet spring getting planted, and a lot of time those planting delays don't show up till harvest. Crop looks good, but because of those late delays in planting, we could potentially see some yields come down. Would be the main thing on the supply side that could maybe give us a bump in prices.
To reiterate what Will said, we're getting out of the weather having the largest effect on the markets. Not to say that an extreme event could cause waves, but growing season underway. We'll see what happens. Mike.
Thanks, Zach. Now for the conclusion of part 3 of On the Farm. Kim Klunk is a large animal veterinarian facing pressure every day to care for her customers' animals in a demanding and widening rural practice. One of the biggest challenges is that the folks she's serving are more than just customers.
I guess not only are they your customers, but they're your friends and your family members, and it becomes quite entwined into everyday life for all of you. And that in and of itself can have some pretty big emotional components to it.
It can be stressful at times when you know that you're the only person available or one of the only people available in the area. You know, you want to be available all the time, but we have lives too.
You know, it's not uncommon for them to call up instead of saying, "Hi, Dr. So-and-so," it's like, "Hi, sis, you know, my dog just threw up everywhere, what do I do?" And it doesn't matter that you're in the middle of a church service.
That can be stressful to be able to mediate the work-life balance, and when it's one person working for the whole area, you know, it's difficult to be able to see all the emergencies and see, you know, get people in and be able to take care of their animals whenever they need help. Come home at night sometimes and I am exhausted from the day, you know, long hours, and, you know, if it's difficult things going on. There is a degree of exhaustion that goes on there. On the long days where a lot that went on, a lot that went wrong. You have to deal with processing if you did the right thing. And you're driving home at the end of the day and you're like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? It's hard, and you have to kind of learn how to manage that mentally and kind of put it in a place where, you know, it doesn't affect you every day. And certainly when you're exhausted, how to keep pushing through and providing the best care you possibly can, even during those times of exhaustion where it feels like you just can't go on anymore.
Just from a mental health perspective, rural areas don't have enough mental health resources that understand the needs of veterinarians. When we start talking about large animal veterinarians, they have completely different needs many times than some of our small animal vets. 1 in 6 veterinarians has considered suicide. 1 in 3 have clinically significant anxiety, depression, and/or depression. And despite knowing the need, less than a third will actually seek help. As large animal vets, they have access to lethal means. And it is on their vehicles and on their trucks, because when they go out to a farm, they need to be prepared to handle whatever comes their way that day. So they do have access. And it's quick and efficient access, and it is deadly.
You go to bed and get back up again the next day and keep trying and try again. You kind of have to reel things back in and go back to the core reasons of why you're doing this and what you're doing it for. And those things are kind of what carry you through. Working with my mom, being back home, it's a really cool thing. So at the end of the day, you kind of dig deeper and find those reasons and evaluate, why you do what you do, and for the love of animals, and keep going on.
Digging deeper indeed. Meanwhile, the stress takes its toll. Very important if you or someone you know is in emotional crisis, call or text 988 anytime for confidential free crisis support. Well, next week, the final installment of On the Farm, Season 2. You met them before here on Farm Week. Longtime father and son dairy farmers David and Will Gilmer made the choice 6 years ago to get out of the dairy business.
Costs were up, profit was down. They decided to try their hand at beef cattle. But the beef cattle business comes with its own challenges, including a steep learning curve.
On the Farm concludes next time on Farm Week.
Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and YouTube. See you next week. Thanks for watching.